Thanks a lot, Anne, and again, thanks for your hospitality. And I'd like to invite Steve Knight, Program Director, the National Library of New Zealand, and Head of the Rosetta User Group, to say a couple of words on behalf of the Rosetta Group.
Thanks, Ali. Who in the room recalls the Garrett and Waters paper on preserving digital information from 1996? Isn't that weird? Anne pointed out that we have a mission problem in terms of getting our message out to our funders and parts of our wider communities and the people that we're going to rely on to be able to do digital preservation going into the future. And here you have 50 or 60 globally recognized experts in digital preservation who have already forgotten one of the seminal papers that actually started digital preservation only 20 years ago. So it's a kind of a weird thing that we've got we're in a situation where we have problematic relationships with our funders and with how we move our organizations forward in digital preservation, and yet we're old enough, so we're young enough to have that problem, but we're also old enough to kind of forget our roots, which is kind of odd. So for us, we started this idea or thinking around digital preservation around about the year 2000, and I was having a conversation with a woman called Kate Roberts, who was the then boss of the physical conservation team at the National Library of New Zealand, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze and wondering, okay, what's going to happen when digital starts to kind of crack on at us? And as a national library or any collecting library, what's the impact of or library or archives or museum or any culture and heritage thing or any government department or any private enterprise? So I think we need to be kind of thoughtful about what the scope of digital preservation is actually going to be as we move forwards. But in our context, we were just asking ourselves the question, kind of how are we going to respond to this idea of digital coming into our collections and the need to give it the same kind of safekeeping that we do with our physical collections when we're talking about 100 years, 200 years, 300 years and that kind of stuff. So we did a bit of work. We started thinking about preservation metadata. We developed some XML metadata schemas for digital preservation based on the work that was just coming out of the National Library of Australia and the CEDARS project in the UK particularly. And then in 2003 we actually had our legislation changed so that the National Library Act actually then allowed us to to collect digital, and so it sort of turned from playtime to real time, and so we had to start to think about what it meant to collect and to keep and to protect. So a couple of years we spent in a dark room thinking about requirements, and we had in the end we had something like 900 pages worth of requirements, and the reason we did that was that we wanted to pull together everything that was then known or thought about digital preservation and try to define what a digital preservation system would look like. And we didn't want to go out to market until we'd decided what a digital preservation system looks like. We didn't want to talk to vendors because we knew that there was no vendor capability to actually ensure that we could think about this in the way that we needed to think about it. So we got $24 million from the New Zealand government, which is how this actually got seeded originally, and so that's how we were able to take that time out to actually build a very fulsome set of requirements. At that stage we were customers of Endeavour, so we were a Voyager and various other bits and pieces of the Endeavour product suite. And in end of 2006, if I recall rightly, Endeavour was gobbled up by Ex Libris when Ex Libris went joint venture funding and started different ways of running its kind of financial kind of processes and what type of company it was. So it was a kind of an interesting idea with the larger fish actually sort of getting a hold of the smaller fish getting a hold of the larger fish as they were at that stage. So we kind of went racing off to San Francisco to have a yak with the new bosses, and particularly to see, because we didn't have a contract signed with Endeavour at that stage, what commitments Ex Libris were going to make to some outstanding conversations that they weren't actually necessarily committed to. And so that was a 3-day conversation with various folk from Ex Libris and myself and Graham Coe, who was my then manager. It was reasonably clear that Ex Libris had come with a view that this wasn't something they needed to commit to because there was no contractual obligation, and they weren't entirely clear about what it was that we were trying to do. So the end result was we said, you guys go away, take all of our requirements, and in 6 months come back and let us know what you think. So it was just trying to kind of give an opportunity to allow some thinking about it that wasn't necessarily tarnished by the people around the room at the time, and it could be done in a fairly clear and objective kind of way. So 4 months later, Ex Libris came back to us and said, this is a really good idea, and we can't do this at the moment. We can't do it with the tools that we've got. We believe that there is a genuine story to be told here, and to their credit, I think, in terms of just intellectual honesty, to change tack completely from wanting to not do it originally to seeing that there was something here that was going to be part of the future thinking around library systems and other kinds of organisational systems was a really interesting decision for us. So this year is the 10th anniversary of the signing of the contract between the National Library of New Zealand and Ex Libris in May 2007. We went live with a soft launch in 2008, and we were fully production with Rosetta in 2010. This point of time, there are over 2,000, wouldn't you love that, Ex Libris? There were over 250 unique individual institutions that are getting their digital preservation programs run through Rosetta. So it's been a slightly slow process. I'm sure on all of our sides we would like to have seen more progress, but I think we shouldn't forget how much progress has been made from a 0 point. And it's not very often that you get to actually kind of be part of the thinking and the development of something that didn't exist 10 years ago and whose conceptualization will still have validity in another 100 years, even if the particular systems are changed and different. So welcome to the 8th Rosetta Advisory Group meeting, and I hope we all have a good couple of days. Thank you.